Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with another book review, and today we are on book 4. Can you believe it? Book 4 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. We are on House of Chains, and we've made it through the first 4 books of the series. So let's get through the particulars. This book was published in 2002. It clocks in at 1,015 pages, minus the appendices, pictures, etc., maps and whatnots, and the look ahead of the next book. And so the back of the book reads thusly. In northern Genebacus, a raiding party of savage tribal warriors descends from the mountains into the southern flatlands. Their intention is to wreak havoc amongst the despised lowlanders, but for the one named Karsa Orlong, it marks the beginning of what will prove to be an extraordinary destiny. Some years later, in the aftermath of the Chain of Dogs, Tavore, the adjunct to the Empress, has arrived in the last remaining Malazan stronghold of 7 cities. New to command, she must hone 12,000 soldiers, mostly raw recruits, but for a handful of veterans of Coltane's legendary march, into a force capable of challenging the massed hordes of Shaiik's whirlwind who lie in wait in the heart of the holy desert. But waiting is never easy. The Seer's warlords are locked into a power struggle that threatens the very soul of the rebellion, while Shaik herself suffers, haunted by the knowledge of her nemesis. I'm not reading the last sentence in this back of this book because it's a spoiler. So there is the general synopsis of House of Chains. I wonder who writes these, because it's interesting to me, having read the books, to see what exactly they sort of latch on to when they write the backs of these books. It's very interesting. So this is the resolution, or the sequel to Dead House Gates. We're back on Genebacus, and we're still talking about the rebellion. The structure of the first 4 books of this series is interesting, and the structure of the series as a whole is interesting from what I gathered. The way that Erikson has sort of written these books is that, the first 4 books, in essence, are a contained story. Now, I say that you could effectively read the first 4 books of the series, and you could get a story, a complete story. It's not the whole story. It's not the whole story that Erikson wants to tell. But you're going to get a story. You're going to get you're going to get a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the way that he sort of structures the books is the first book, The Gardens of the Moon, it introduces us to the characters, the stories, and whatnot. And then the end of Gardens of the Moon, the book splits. Characters splits. And half of the characters go to Dead House Gates, and then we have a story of those characters. And the other half of the characters goes to Memories of Ice. And Dead House and Memories sort of happen simultaneously. And we have Memories of Ice, and then we have that story. And then we go back to House of Chains, and we have the resolution of Dead House Gates. And effectively the resolution of the whole sort of first 4 books, as it were. So, Dead House Gates is it's not really, it's a loose sequel to Gardens, but Memories of Ice is really a sequel to Gardens of the Moon, like a sort of a direct sequel-ish. And then House of Chains is a direct sequel-ish to Dead House Gates. So, if you were to read the first 4 books, and you were to dead stop after this book, you'd get a complete story. You would get a beginning, a middle, an end, a resolution of... You would get a resolution of what Erikson wanted to talk about in the first 4 books. You would. You could effectively do that if that was your thing. You wouldn't get the whole story, you wouldn't get the whole picture, because there's still a lot of answers that need to be, a lot of questions that need to be answered. But you would get an ending of a sort, right? Because book 5, Midnight Tides, is a standalone. It's a backstory to a character. So we have 4 books that tell a story. Then we get a break. We get a backstory, a flashback, a standalone book that tells the story of a character and something that happened in the past. And then the last 5 books, 6 through 10, is, I guess, from what I read, and we'll find out, is a one-shot ending, one-shot series. No more flashing around, no more doing this. One-shot and straight line to the end. That's what I'm trying to say. Straight line to the end. So it's an interesting structure of a series. He must have plotted all of this out to the letter before he wrote these, because there's a lot of breadcrumbs in each of the books that get answered several books down the road, where you go, oh my God, that I know that reference, or that's where that came from. So this must have been very, very intricately plotted as a series as a whole, and then as individual books as he went along. So how did we like House of Chains? We talked a little bit about the series, and how did we like House of Chains? I enjoyed it. I did. I will say that I can understand why people may consider this a weak book in the series. And I think that has to do with expectations. This book, comparative to the 3 books that we just read, this book is slow. I would consider this a very, very slow read. Not a lot actually happens in the book. There's not a lot of big battles. There's not a lot of things going on. Not a lot of, big skirmishes and battles and whatnot. It is, comparative to the rest of the series, slow. Very slow. And if you are expecting to go into House of Chains with the same frenetic pace that you got from Gardens and Dead House and Memories of Ice, then you would be disappointed, because it doesn't have that balls to the wall, barrel to the end, frenetic pacing that we have grown accustomed to. It's downright slow. Not to say that it's bad. And I think it needed to be slow. I think Erikson needed to pump the brakes a little bit, to give us a slowdown and to give us a resolution to all of the stuff that he put out in book 1, 2, and 3. I think he needed to do that. I don't think you can keep that pace. It's impossible to set a bar so high and then to keep raising the bar book after book after book. Eventually, you are going to have to slow down. You are going to have to draw back and say, okay, we need to breathe, and we need to take it a little slower, and we need to wrap up some things, and we need to answer some things, and we need to just kind of do that. And that's what he did with House of Chains. He pumped the brakes, he slowed it down. It's not as frenetically paced as the other books. And to people that may want that pacing, that, balls to the wall, end to end, action to action, all kinds of stuff going on, that would be a disappointment. I didn't find it to be a disappointment. I found it to be, in a way, refreshing, because now I can read it, I can digest it, I can understand it. It's the first book that I actually really understood end to end. I can understand it, and I can start connecting the dots and making all the connections and answering all the questions. He does a couple of different things with this book. One is he slows the pace down. 2, he takes the first 250 pages of the book and he dedicates it to a single character. In the first 250 pages of the book, he tells Karsa Orlong's story. And that's unusual. He doesn't usually dedicate a giant chunk of a book to one character and their story. And he did. He did in this book. That was unique. That was different. That's not what we had gotten before. And I well, I liked it. I liked it because you really got to learn about this character. And it's interesting because it's interesting to think about the arc of this character, because as I started to read this story about this person, about this character, I hated him. In the beginning, I'm like, why? I don't understand this. Why are we hearing about this person? And we're just talking about this person. And I didn't like the person. I didn't like the person's attitude. Didn't like what the person was doing. Didn't like the situation. Didn't like anything else. I'm like, I don't really like this person. And I gotta go the rest of the book with this person. And then he brings that person up to present times in the story, and then integrates him into what's going on. And then you get to the end of the story, and you're like, the person, Karsa at the end of the story, is not the person he was at the beginning of the story. The character arc that went from end to end, the fact that he was able to take a character and make me go, I don't like this character. I don't know why I'm reading about this character. I don't see the value in this character, to getting to the end of the book and going, yeah, and you're rooting for the character. Now you're invested in the character. That's a testament to the writing skills of Erikson and the way he plots it out. It's a great arc. I think it's a great arc through this story, and it makes sense. I understand now why he dedicated the first quarter of the book to Karsa, and he brought us along the journey, and then he catches us and Karsa up to where they are, and then we get a resolution. And at the end of the book, Karsa becomes one of the biggest badasses of the story. And it's a very interesting and unique way of showing that. The other issue that people might have, and I don't really know if I have an issue with it or not. I really haven't sat with it long enough to determine whether I absolutely hate it or I think it's brilliant or I like it. A lot of issues that other people had was with the issue of Tavore and the resolution of the rebellion. Tavore, a lot of people think, is a weak character, that she doesn't do a lot, and she didn't do a lot. You finally meet her, and she didn't do a lot in the story. She really didn't, but I think that's part of her character, is that she's new to war. She's new to serving in the military, in the army. She's new to all of these things. That's not her background. Her background is not in warfare, soldiery, military tactics. That's not her background. So was she in over her head? Absolutely. She was. I think that was the point, though. And I think we're going to get... I don't have an opinion on her story yet, because I don't think her story is done. We got more books to come, and I think there may be more to her story down the pike. So I can't really say definitively whether I liked where she was or not, because I think we're just seeing her, and we're seeing her be unsure. We're seeing her be, maybe surrounding herself with people who know more than she does. And maybe we question some of her decisions and some of her tactics. But she's new, and she's a newbie, and this isn't her background. And I think, like everything else that Erikson is doing, I think all of the books, they're gonna shape people. So at the end of this, I don't expect her to be anywhere near where she is right now. There wasn't a big battle. There was an ending to the rebellion. I think people could consider it, weak, because there wasn't a giant crushing battle. We didn't get that. We got an ending to the rebellion, and it felt to me, I guess I expected something a little different. I expected a confrontation between the adjunct and Shaikh, and I was kind of I think I kind of hyped it up in my head of how this explosion that was going to happen, and it didn't happen. But I think what actually did happen is bittersweet, because I think when Tavore finally realizes the depth and breadth and weight of what she did at the end of that to crush that rebellion, I think that's going to change her. And I don't know if she's ever going to find out. We'll find out because we're going to keep going with the series. But I think he's setting the character up for when that revelation finally hits her. It's either going to build her up or it's going to crush her. So we'll see. So I did like it. It's a lot slower. And we get, again, in standard Erikson fashion, we get more people. We get more people. We get introduced to more characters. We get introduced to everything else. We get to see some old characters again from previous books. I will say I did think that the plot line with Trull and Onrak was, I don't want to say boring, but I didn't understand a lot of it. I wasn't invested in that plot line. It was a thing that happened, and I'm sure there's going to be ramifications of that down the road. But as a sort of standalone, as a B plot running through the series, it didn't move me either way. It was a thing that happened. I wasn't rooting for it. I didn't hate it. I wasn't rooting. But it was just a thing that was there. And again, he likes to lay a lot of foundational work in these books, so the payoff may come 2, 3, 4 books down the road, may come in the next book. We'll see. But you know, I can see why people would say it's weaker. I'm not going to say that it's a weaker installment in the series or of the 4 books that I've read so far. I'm not going to say it's weaker. I'm just going to say it's slower. It's slower. It gives you time to breathe, gives you time to sit with the story more, gives you time to sit with all of the story that he's laid out up to this point. I gave it a 4 on Goodreads. I thought a 4 out of 5 was a fair assessment of the book. But I think the book was necessary. I think we needed to breathe. I think we needed to sit with the book and the story, and we needed to connect the dots, we needed to fill in some holes, and we needed to do all of that stuff. And Erikson allowed us to do that. It was a 4. I rated it a 4 out of 5 on my Goodreads. And as a whole, as far as where the first 4 books stand, we're 4 books deep into the series now. And out of the 4 books that I've read, I'm still going to say so far that Dead House Gates is my favorite. Still. Dead House Gates and Memories of Ice, out of the first 4 books, I think are the strongest books of the first 4. But I still like Dead House Gates better out of all of them. Out of all of the 4, that's still my favorite. I still think about that one. I still think about The Chain of Dogs. I still think about the characters in that book. And that's the sign of a good book, a good writer, a good story, is that you're still thinking about it. And anytime anybody in any of the other books mentions what happened, you go, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was rough. Oh, that was rough. So that's where we are in our journey through Malazan. We're 4 books down, and the books just keep getting bigger, and the story just keeps getting bigger. Gave this a 4 out of 5. I think it's still a good book. It's the slowest of the first 4, so that's new. And like I said at the beginning, I think if you were to read the first 4 books, and if you dead stopped at House of Chains and said, you know what, I'm done with the series, you're still going to get a story. You get a good story. You get a good beginning to the end. It's like a trilogy, right? You get a good trilogy. You got a good trilogy of stories. And the back half, I'm sure, is going to give us even more. But for those of you who make it through House of Chains and say, I'm done, I still think you get a good story. End to end. Gardens to Chains. You don't get the whole story, but you get a good story. So, guys, that's my review of House of Chains. Look at that cover. I just love this cover. This cover is great. I love this cover. It's one of my favorite covers of the first 4. I like this one. So, guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. We're just trucking along, and I'm on book 5, Midnight Tides, and that one's going pretty good. So we are going along the journey. We're down the road, down the Malazan road, and I'm interested to see where we're gonna go, because I think to myself, how can he possibly give us more story? Where can we go from here? What is he gonna do next? How can we possibly get more story? And when I think of that, we get more story. We get more things added on to it. So that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. As usual, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, pass it around. Share it with your friends, tell your enemies, tell your friends, tell your dogs, your cats, your goldfish, your gerbils, your hamsters, and whatever other pets you may own. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.